In this week's episode of Endzone Insights, we're going to be ranking every starting quarterback in the National Football League. Welcome back into Endzone Insights, where you can get the best takes from the next generation of sports fans. I'm your host, Darius Fitzpatrick, and before we get into today's episode, I just want to say that I find that this time of year is usually the best time of year to rank quarterbacks. Usually, what happens is that during the final few weeks of the season, when most people would be coming up with their final rankings for QBs, they judge QBs too heavily based on what happens in the postseason. I'm not saying that the postseason is unimportant to QB rankings. However, the playoffs and the Super Bowl can boost a player's ranking or drop a player's ranking far away from where they were originally during the season. I've met a lot of people who have put QBs way higher on their list for simply winning a playoff game, without accounting for all the circumstances surrounding that game, or vice versa. So when the summer time comes around, I feel that it allows for people to take in everything each quarterback did in the regular and postseason and fairly evaluate them. Now, for this ranking that I have made, I need everyone to understand that this is a personal ranking and that some of the QB rankings may make some people mad. One final thing is that this is just based on what we have seen on these QBs thus far, not on what they could be in the future. With all that being said, let's begin. And we will start off today's video at number 32 with Arizona Cardinals QBs Carson Beck and Jacoby Brissett. Now, I put both QBs here due to the fact we do not know which one would be the starting quarterback for the Cardinals in 2026. If I had to pick right now, I'd probably go with Jacoby Brissett. However, I have to just put them both there just because of the fact it's not official as of yet. But besides that point, even looking at both of them, neither one of them inspires hope for a fan base. Jacoby Brissett is a good QB who has been very serviceable at times. However, to have him compete in the NFL as a starting QB for an entire season is not something I feel comfortable with. On the other side of things with Carson Beck, I know that people like to get their jokes in about him with the mess that happened in his second year as the starting quarterback at Georgia and his appearance. However, he was able to rebuild his career at Miami, and I truly do believe that he was a much better draft prospect than most people believed. He's known to have a high football IQ. He was much quicker with the football at Miami and had 3 years worth of starts in college. In my opinion, if I were to draft a QB, I want them to have at least 2 years of starting experience if I were to draft them because of the recent busts such as Anthony Richardson and Mitch Trubisky with less than 1 year of starting experience in going to the NFL. Despite that, I still know that he does not possess the physical traits of a franchise QB and was very inconsistent at times in college. Both could be great backups in the NFL. However, Brissett is not a full starting quarterback in the NFL, and Beck doesn't have the abilities to be a franchise QB. So leaving that, they'll both remain at number 32. And then at number 31, we have Geno Smith of the New York Jets. I put him over Beck and Brissett due to the fact we have seen him have great plays when he was in Seattle. However, after a disastrous year he had in 2025, where he secured the Raiders the number one overall pick, soon to be 36, and now he doesn't possess the mobility he once had, he secured himself the 31 spot on this list. Now, at number 30, we have Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. And I put them there mainly because of the fact that Shedeur Sanders did not play well in his rookie year, and also Deshaun Watson has been out for multiple seasons. Well, has been out for a season and a half. Now, I just want to say this first. Neither QB has established themselves as a starting quarterback in this league. Shedeur Sanders was a fifth-round pick who threw 10 picks to only 7 interceptions last year, and Deshaun Watson has only played in 19 out of 67 games since arriving in Cleveland. Now, I know that Deshaun Watson was once a high-level QB with the Houston Texans. However, he hasn't had a 1,500 passing yard season in a year since getting to Cleveland, and has had multiple season-ending injuries, as I've already said. I also want to remind everyone that his last top-tier season that everyone is still hanging on to that I'm seeing was in 2020. For context, that was 6 years ago and COVID-19 was still rampant. For Sanders, I understand he didn't get that many first team reps with Cleveland Browns last year. It was essentially set up to fail by Kevin Stefanski. So overall, he did better than what was given to him. Still, it wasn't enough to solidify him as a starting QB this year, placing both of them at number 30. At number 29, we have Michael Penix and Tua Tagovailoa. When I look at both these QBs, I see one thing in common: injuries. Both QBs have struggled with injuries throughout their careers, giving them a less than productive NFL career thus far. For Penix, we have seen very little of him to judge thus far. However, it is hard for me to fully believe in him with the accuracy issues he showed throughout last year. I do believe he could have fixed those accuracy issues up with a full season of play to adjust to the NFL level. However, that is where the injury concerns stem from, as he tore his ACL in Week 11 versus the Carolina Panthers. Tua has also been dealt a bad deal with injuries, specifically concussions. That is not the main reason he is so low on this list, though. He is further down on the list because of the constant turnovers, along with his unwillingness to push the ball downfield. With QBs such as Josh Allen, when they turn the ball over, it is fine because fans know that they will follow it up with a big play of his own and score enough points where it negates the turnover. The same cannot be said for Tua, as it is always looks like he is more scared to make a big play. Now, he will have a better supporting cast around him in Atlanta than he had in Miami, and we have seen him play good football when he did have a good supporting cast in Miami during the 2022 and 2023 season. However, we cannot just judge on hypotheticals. That is why I'm having him and Michael Penix land at number 29. And at number 28, we have, now I know some people will make fun of him because of his memes of 9, but we have J.J. McCarthy, or 9, along with Kyler Murray. And they mostly land on this place because of J.J. McCarthy, because of what we've seen out of him. Now, I will be the first to admit that last year at this point in time, I thought J.J. McCarthy would have become a viable starter for the Minnesota Vikings. I believe that Kevin O'Connell had set him up with a good supporting cast, and I thought that with QBs that Casey had been able to get career years out of, that J.J. McCarthy would have been no different. Well, I was wrong, and as J.J. McCarthy was absolutely miserable for the Vikings. He had receivers such as Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison have career lows. Sorry to anyone who had them on their fantasy teams. And McCarthy also struggled to stay on the field. He had accuracy and turnover issues and had terrible pocket presence. Murray puts this ranking up higher, in part because we have seen him in the past be able to have moments of high caliber play. Those moments of high caliber play have also come with moments of low caliber play. And more so recently, it has been a lot of low caliber play. The main issue for Kyler has been his consistency, as it seems that when he's in a bad stretch, he can't seem to get out of it, and he can't elevate anyone around him as people once thought. He also had several season-ending injuries, which has kept him off the field in the last few years. Now, as I said earlier, I believed in Kevin O'Connell last year, and I still believe in Casey as a head coach, to the point where I think he can revitalize Kyler Murray's career like he did with Sam Darnold. However, until we see it, Kyler is placed at 28 along with 9. Next up at 27, we have Malik Willis. And Malik Willis places at number 27 purely because of the fact he has never been a starter in this league before. I truly did love what he was able to do with the Packers when Jordan Love went down, and I honestly thought that as a team like the Falcons or Vikings should have been more interested in Malik, as they were in a win-now scenario, and Malik is still young and has a great skill set. However, the lack of NFL starts still, since he got into the league in 2022, forces me to not put him up any higher. And next we have Fernando Mendoza and Kirk Cousins. First off, I just wanted to say how interesting it is to see how much hype Fernando has been getting since joining the NFL. I'm only 17 years old, but I can't remember a QB as talked about as Mendoza coming out of college. Maybe that is because I live close to Raider territory as I am in California, but it is still fun to see how Raider Nation has taken him in. However, currently Fernando places this low because he has never taken an NFL snap before, However, his ability in college proved to be more than enough to be a franchise QB for the Raiders. The same can't be said for Kirk Cousins, though, as he has not been able to get back to the caliber of play we once saw him in Minnesota. His turnovers have increased dramatically since leaving Minnesota, and he struggles when pressure arrives. Now, he did improve in 2025 season compared to the 2024 season, and I do anticipate him being decent this year. However, at this stage of his career, he is not the same quarterback he once was, and I could easily see him retiring within the next few years. Jackson Dart places at number 25 overall, and I know some people will get mad at this because they believe that he should be higher. I understand that he was fun to watch last year and truly brought a new energy to the Giants. It was the first time I had watched and wanted to watch a team that looked like their season was over in early October. However, you can see the dramatic drop off in production from Dart once Dayball was fired after a 24-20 loss to the Chicago Bears, in which they blew another lead. He averaged less passing yards, threw only 5 touchdowns, and what I saw were several games where it felt like Dart couldn't get anything going with the offenses at that time. Not to mention, he was out for several games due to concussions he had suffered from his running style, which many, including myself, perceived as reckless. I do believe Jackson Dart will improve. However, there are several things to fix in his game, and with the regression we saw late in the season last year, he places at number 25. Now, Cam Ward places ahead of Dart based purely on the fact that he had improved as the season went along, and he possesses more playmaking ability compared to Dart. I think the main reason that people may not think that this is because Dart plays in a big market team such as the Giants, where everything is being monitored compared to the Titans living in a smaller market like Tennessee. As a fan of a small market team such as the Carolina Panthers, I know how angering it can be to see that one team gets talked about more can make it seem like a certain player is better than they actually are. However, I saw the incredible flashes from Cam Ward at the end of the season, Titans fans. He was able to generate backfield magic not just against lower level teams, but against opponents such as the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, where I thought to myself he could actually pull off the upset against those high level teams. Now, unfortunately for Cam Ward, the team around him was not very productive. This honestly made him higher on my list, though, because he was able to make many games competitive where the team around him was not pulling their weight. For example, he had 3,169 passing yards this year, which may not sound that impressive, but when you look at the fact that his leading receiver, and sorry if I mess up this name, was Chigo Conquo, who only had 560 receiving yards, it makes that stat much more impressive. So even though his ranking may not be high right now, I fully anticipate him to be much higher on this list next year. Well, it's time to take a quick break, and in a moment we will continue this QB ranking and see who ends up placing number 1. The answer may surprise you. Welcome back into Endzone Insights, and we shall continue this list with the New Orleans Saints QB Tyler Shough, who places at 23. As a Panthers fan who had to cheer for this guy to beat the Buccaneers, while also hating him for beating my team twice, I saw the glimpses of what the future of New Orleans could be. Tyler Shough showed an impressive deep ball and running ability, along with much needed accuracy that separates him from the previous rookie QBs of his class. You could also see the newfound life that was brought onto the Saints once he became the starting quarterback, as he had a record of 5-4 since becoming the starter, far better than where they were before he was the starter, which was 1-7. He still has several things to work on going into 2026, including scoring more, which was a main reason why the Saints were constantly having to battle out in games. He also needs to work on the amount of sacks he took, as he took a high amount of sacks last year. He also didn't play the fiercest of competition in his limited time of play, which forces me to put him at 23. However, similar to Ward, I do anticipate him being much higher next year. I also do believe that the Saints could make a push for the division, and as a Panthers fan, that truly hurts me to say. Now, some people may not like how low Aaron Rodgers is And this has nothing to do with the career he has had. I consider Aaron Rodgers to be an all-time great QB, and it would be awful if he were to not be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, which, after seeing what happened to Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, may be a possibility. But that's a discussion for another time. This low ranking of Aaron Rodgers is not predicated on his off-the-field issues as well. It is more so predicated on Mother Nature. Aaron Rodgers is still a viable QB at this stage of his career, but I don't see him giving his team much else. He doesn't command the pocket like he used to, and doesn't throw the ball downfield as he used to either. He has also given away more turnovers and doesn't possess the running ability he once had in previous years. I'm saying this while still trying to reiterate the fact that he had a bounce back year with the Steelers in 2025, and I expect a similar result in 2026. However, that is also a problem. With the way he has played in the last few seasons, I don't believe that at this age he can give anything more than average play. At number 21, we have Daniel Jones. I'm sorry, people. I know that some people may have wanted him higher up on the list for the incredible year he had in 2025, which I can understand. That being said, we started to see a little regression towards the end of the season with his play. It wasn't a big regression, but a regression nonetheless. He also has had major injuries throughout his career, including in 2025, and he has never put together back-to-back years of good QB play. He could do that this year, but I don't trust a QB who struggles with major injuries and cannot put together 2 consistent years of good QB play. Jaden Daniels is next up on the list at number 20, and a year ago I would not have put him at 20. He would have been much higher for me after the incredible rookie season that he had, and I think a lot of people would have agreed with me. He had one of the greatest rookie seasons for a QB of all time and was one game away, just one, from being the first rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl. You can see the difference in the Commanders fans and the hope that he gave them. However, last season was a much different story. He had sustained several injuries that derailed his season, but even before he had those injuries, he had struggled during the season. His completion percentage in 2024, which was his rookie season, was at 69%. That was pretty good. But in 2025, he had a completion percentage of 60.6%. That is a major drop-off in a quarterback who had an all-time great NFL season. Along with that, he struggled to get into the end zone, as many of his touchdowns came at the back end of games when the game was already decided. Now, everything else around him was going awry as well, so it wasn't all his fault. However, I can't ignore the dramatic regression he had and the numerous injuries he sustained last year. At 19, we have CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud, similar to Jaden Daniels, had one of the greatest rookie QB seasons of all time back in his rookie year in 2023. However, since then, there has been a dramatic regression with CJ Stroud. I know everyone will be turning to the last 2 playoff performances he had, but it's not just those 2 games. He has had more turnovers along with less passing touchdowns and passing yards in the last 2 seasons. Not to mention the fact that in 2025, the Texans had a Super Bowl caliber defense that allowed for the Texans to always remain in games. The problem was that CJ Stroud was not able to elevate the offense around him. This put the Houston Texans in a constant position of being in close games, no matter what the team they played. We saw this against the Kansas City Chiefs last year, where the Houston Texans should have won that game easily, as the Chiefs gave away 3 interceptions. That should be more than enough for the Texans to get out there with an easy one. However, CJ Stroud struggled in that game and forced the Texans defense to have to bail them out in the entire game. It hasn't been all CJ's fault, though, as his O-line has been a train wreck the last 2 years, and there's been injuries across his receiving corps. That being said, I can't deny the dramatic regression he's had the last 2 years and how his trajectory has been downward recently. At number 18, and some people may hate me for doing this, we have Bryce Young. Yes, I am a Panthers fan, so some people may hate me for choosing Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. However, for the last 2 years, all I've been hearing from people is a dramatic regression from CJ. All I've been hearing from people is a step forward that Bryce Young has taken. The main thing I look at with CJ compared to Bryce is that Bryce has had less to work with for most of his career. But these past 2 years, he has been able to elevate some of the players around him. The main issue with Bryce, though, is his inconsistency. There are times as a Panthers fan where I just don't know if Bryce is the guy. There are times, such as the past two times that Bryce played the Rams, or when he passed for 448 yards against the Atlanta Falcons, where it seems like no opposing defense can stop him. They could do nothing to stop him. However, with that also comes the times where he cannot get anything going and will pass for barely over 100 yards and throws multiple interceptions. He places at 18 currently, but if he is to be the franchise QB, he will need to be more consistent in 2026. Trevor Lawrence is next up on the list, and when watching Trevor Lawrence in 2025, it finally felt like we got the product we were all waiting for him to become coming out of Clemson. Trevor Lawrence became an MVP candidate last year, being 6th in passing yards, 5th in passing touchdowns, and tied for 2nd in rushing TDs with 9. Like Bryce Young, though, Trevor Lawrence is not higher on this list because of his inconsistencies. Trevor Lawrence has had high points in his career, but he has had many low points in his career as well. We even saw it at the beginning of last season, where it did take him a few weeks to adjust to Liam Cohen's system that he was running. Similar to Daniel Jones, we have not seen Trevor Lawrence have back-to-back years of good QB play. Heading into the season, many people were questioning if he was even going to be the starter for the Jaguars in 2027. Now, Trevor has shown a lot more than Daniel Jones, and he's had less injuries, which is why he is so much higher than Daniel Jones. If Trevor Lawrence can have another season like last year, he will be much higher on the list come next year. At number 16, we have Jalen Hurts. Now, if you've listened to me before about Jalen Hurts, you know how I feel about him. I do feel that he is a good QB. However, in the last 2 years, what has been the main concerns with the Eagles? The passing attack. In the last 2 years, the Eagles have ranked 24th in third down conversion and 23rd in big passing plays in 2025. Jalen Hurts has really struggled these last few years, and when you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, Dallas Goedert, you shouldn't struggle nearly as much as Jalen Hurts has. I always think to myself that if Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen were to have this roster that was assembled in Philadelphia, imagine what they could have done with it. That's why I can't put him in the top 10 like other commentators might, but because he lowers the ceiling down for an offense that should be in the NFC Championship game every single season. Now, Jalen Hurts is top 5 in wins among QBs in the NFL and has won a Super Bowl, so I can't deny that he is a good QB. However, when the year you won the Super Bowl and the year following it, the passing attack is your biggest weakness as a team, then your quarterback doesn't deserve to be top 10 in the NFL. Well, we're going to take a quick break right here, and when we come back, we will see which QBs land in the top half of the NFL. Welcome back into Endzone Insights, and we shall be continuing this ranking at number 15, where we have Denver Broncos QB Bo Nix. Bo Nix had a steady year last year. Statistically, it was a pretty good year. However, there would be times where you would watch Bo Nix and wonder, which version are you going to get out of him? Are you going to get the version of him where it looks like he is one of the best QBs in the entire league, or the version of him that looks lost on the football field? This definitely did limit the offense's potential last year and forced them into close games against teams like the Raiders and the Jets. This was one of the reasons why I didn't believe that the Broncos would make the Super Bowl heading into the playoffs. That being said, Bo Nix has been a well above average starter for the Denver Broncos since entering the league. He is top 5 for the most game-winning drives among QBs since 2024. He's had over 3,500 passing yards in both of the last two seasons and gave the Broncos the one seed in only his second season in the NFL. I don't know how well he will be in the upcoming season after his knee injury against the Buffalo Bills. However, currently he ranks at number 15. Next, we have Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers, placing it at number 14. I feel that Brock Purdy is one of the most disrespected QBs in the NFL. When other QBs are questioned of their ability, many fans bring up their accomplishments. However, Purdy's accomplishments seem to fade away and not get mentioned at all. He has already reached a Super Bowl in his career. He is one of the most accurate QBs in the NFL and has better mobility when the pocket breaks down than most people want to let on to. I understand the sentiment around him that he is only good because of all the weapons that he has surrounding him. This is an understandable way to feel. However, we saw in 2025 when most of the 49ers roster was injured and when Brock Purdy got back from injury, he was able to play pretty well. At the end of the 2025 season, he passed for 16 touchdowns, led the 49ers to 5 games where they scored more than 25 points, and had one of the highest passer ratings in the NFL in 2025. Now, he has dealt with more injuries as of late, and it's been seen that when he is off his game, things can go bad really quickly. We saw this when he played against the Carolina Panthers this year, where he threw 3 interceptions. However, Purdy is a good QB, and I don't believe that people are right when they say that anyone who is in the 49ers system would have thrived. We saw Trey Lance be in that system for 2 years and still struggled. And while the system is easier for Brock Purdy than other QBs playing in the NFL, the NFL is hard no matter what system you're in. That's just a fact of it. Next, at number 13, we have Baker Mayfield. And while he did have a down year in 2025, it must be put into context. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster was filled with injuries the entire season, and even Mayfield suffered a shoulder injury when they played against the Rams on Sunday Night Football. While he didn't miss a game in the season, you could clearly see the injury was limiting him as his passing yards went down, and 6 of 11 of his interceptions came after that Rams game. That being said, since joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker has been one of the best QBs in the NFL. In his first 2 years with the Buccaneers, he had over 4,000 yards passing and still had 3,500 passing yards in 2025. He has also had his completion percentage increase dramatically since joining the Buccaneers, and similar to Josh Allen, he's one of the few QBs who throws many interceptions, but is good enough to the point where his own performance can negate the interception. I do believe that Baker Mayfield is one of the most underrated QBs in the NFL, and with a bounce back year in 2026, he will be in the top 10 once again next year. At number 12, we have Jordan Love. Now, I don't live in Wisconsin, so I don't see the constant hate that Jordan Love receives. However, I know that many people are skeptical of him for his up and down play at times. There are moments when watching Jordan Love where I think he is the best QB in the NFL. And there are points in time where I also think he is playing way too recklessly. That being said, I do believe that there is more pressure on him to perform because of the fact that he is taking over for 2 Hall of Fame QBs in Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. This kind of negates some of the improvements that he's made over the last few seasons. In 2025, his completion percentage went up by 3%, and he had 5 less interceptions than he had in the previous 2 seasons. He places ahead of Brock Purdy and Baker Mayfield because he's more talented with his off-script ability and manages the pocket better than either of those 2 QBs. While he still needs to stop making so many reckless plays that put the Packers in dangerous situations, his overall play is still one of the best in the entire National Football League. And next, at number 11, we have Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams had a stellar 2025 seasons. He passed for a Bears franchise record in passing yards and brought the Bears back to the divisional round of the playoffs for the first time since 2010. I will admit, I was worried at the first with the transition that Ben Johnson and Caleb would have together, since Ben Johnson had Jared Goff, work under a very, very different style of play compared to Caleb Williams. And for the first few weeks of the season, there was a bit of struggle between the two of them. However, as the season progressed, you could see Caleb start to understand the offense more and improve on the things he struggled with in his first season, such as taking less sacks, standing within the pocket, and not holding on to the ball for a long period of time. His completion percentage does keep him out of the top 10, though, as he was one of the lowest rated QBs in the NFL in terms of completion percentage. This would put the Bears in difficult position at many times, and especially when they needed a small completion to advance a drive. However, he has generational talent that transcends what most other NFL QBs have, making him one of the most dangerous QBs in the NFL at times. We'll take a quick break right here, and when we come back, it will be time to reveal who places in the top 10 and where each one of them stacks. Welcome back into Endzone Insights, and next up we have Drake May placing at 10th overall. In talking about it with others, I know that there will be people skeptical of why I put him so high on this list. Yes, the Patriots did play a lighter schedule compared to others, which made things easier for him, and he did not play well in the Super Bowl or any of the games in the playoffs. However, we cannot take away all the amazing progress he made in the season and the fact he made it to the Super Bowl. I feel that many people forget that he was only one vote away from winning the NFL MVP. And while I do agree that Matthew Stafford should have won MVP, being a finalist for that award should just go to show that he had an incredible season. He threw for 4,394 yards and 31 touchdowns last year when his receiving cast was not the greatest to begin with. It was not awful. I'm not saying it's awful. However, it is not on the same levels as the Rams or Cowboys receiver room. He does get knocked down on this list because of his performance in the playoffs and Super Bowl, but I'm not going to deny the incredible season that he had in 2025. Remember, all those teams he played are still NFL teams with talented players on them. At number 9, we have Dak Prescott. Get it in, Cowboy haters. You can say what you want about Dak Prescott, but he had an incredible season last year where he was able to put up 4,500 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, placing him top 5 in both of those categories. However, many people forget about this because of how horrendous the defense was for the Cowboys last year. No matter how many points they put up, the defense could not get a single stop. People also forget of how good a QB he is because of the fact he plays for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not saying that Dak is one of the best QBs of all time, but in 3 of the past 5 seasons, he's put up MVP numbers, and in the other 2 seasons, he was out for several games due to injury. He is very inconsistent in the playoffs and only has 2 playoff wins, so I can't put him much higher, but Dak deserves more respect than people give him. It doesn't matter what team he plays for, the hate he receives is unnecessary and does not show the great QB he actually is. Next on this list, we have Sam Darnold, and the reason he places in the top 10 is because of the incredible seasons he's had the last 2 years. They have not been perfect seasons, as he still has a turnover issue. That being said, he has passed for over 4,000 yards in the last 2 seasons, has more talent than most of the other QBs in the NFL, and led the Seattle Seahawks to their first Super Bowl win since the Legion of Boom era. Now I know there will be some people who are critical of Sam Darnold because of his time with the Jets. However, he has had MVP caliber seasons the last 2 years and won the Super Bowl, a feat that most of the other QBs on this list have never reached and probably never will reach. The only reason he is not in the top 5 currently is because of his turnover issues. However, similar to Dak, more people should acknowledge the fact that Darnold is one of the best QBs in the NFL, and he is here to stay for a long time. Now, Justin Herbert is next QB from the 2020 class and one of only 2 to be in the top 10. When I was making this list, I didn't know where to exactly put Justin Herbert. I knew he was going to be in the top 10 of this list, but I didn't know where in the top 10 he should be. On one hand, his supporting cast of his career has never truly been there where it needs to be. His offensive line is in constant flux. His receiving room is never truly dominant outside of maybe one key receiver each and every season. And in seasons such as last year, his running game can never truly get going. Yet he still puts up great numbers every single season and is willing his team to the postseason every year. That is the issue though. He's had much trouble in the postseason. Herbert in his 6 years with the Chargers has never won a playoff game. If you were to tell someone that after his rookie season, no one would believe you. That is the truth of the matter, though. Now, he did have one of the worst O lines during his playoff games with the Patriots, so I am not blaming him entirely for that loss. However, the comeback loss against the Jaguars in 2023 and the loss to the Texans in 2025 should never have happened. Both games they were favored, and against the Jaguars, he was up significantly and could not do anything offensively to get some more points for the Chargers in that second half. Against the Texans offense had not been playing well for most of the season and even struggled in that game. Then Herbert threw 4 interceptions in that game, which was more interceptions in that single game than he had all season long. Herbert has also never truly been in the conversation as one of the top tier QBs in any season he has played. He has always been considered to be a tier below. So while he has played tremendously well with the Chargers every single year, even when the cast around him is not, he has struggled in the postseason and does not play to the level of tier 1 QB would play at. Sorry if I messed up right there, but what I'm trying to say is he is not a tier 1 QB like some of the other QBs like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are. And just one away from the top 5, we have Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. I think I've said this a lot, but I do believe that he is one of the most underrated QBs in the NFL, similar to Brock Purdy and Jordan Love. Yes, he may not have the mobility of Lamar Jackson or the flashy plays like Patrick Mahomes, but just looking at him playing the QB position, he is one of the best QBs in the entire NFL. Since getting to Detroit, he has had a record of 48, 33, and 1. And most of those losses came in his first 2 seasons with Detroit when they were still rebuilding. Since those first 2 seasons, he has led Detroit to 2 playoff wins, the number 1 seed in 2025, and an NFC Championship game appearance in the 2024 season. Now, last year was not the greatest season for Detroit, as they went 9-8 because the offensive line around Goff was one of the team's biggest weaknesses, and the offensive coordinator mess they had, but he still performed well. He still passed for 4,500 yards and 34 touchdowns. So last season, when the Lions offense was struggling with a new offensive coordinator and an offensive line unit that was in flux, Goff was still playing at a high level. I've seen a lot of other QBs be put in that same exact situation and not be able to play nearly as well as Goff has in the last year. Now, as I mentioned before, he does not possess the athletic ability that other QBs have and sometimes struggles when under constant pressure. And then that's the reason he narrowly is put away from the top 5. But considering the expectations that people had for Goff when he got to Detroit and what he's done since, I don't think any Detroit fan would argue about having Jared Goff as their QB. Finally, getting into the top 5, we have Joe Burrow at number 5. Now, the only reason Joe Burrow is not on this list, higher on this list, is because of the injuries he has sustained throughout his career. He's had multiple injuries that have kept him out for months, hurting the Bengals overall. When he is on the field, though, he is one of the best QBs in the entire NFL. When looking at some of the other QBs in the NFL, Joe Burrow has had the worst supporting cast out of all of them. His running game is inconsistent, his offensive line is always struggling, which is another factor for all the injuries he's had, and his defense has been one of the worst defenses in NFL history the last 2 years. Despite all of that going against him, Joe Burrow has been one of the best QBs when he's on the field. A prime example of this is when Joe Burrow led the Bengals to 9-8 record, despite everything that could have possibly gone wrong going wrong that season. From a bad defense to missed calls late in games, missed field goals, head coaching difficulties, Everything was going awry that season. Still, he managed to throw for nearly 5,000 passing yards, 43 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions. Also, you can bring his play from last year into the conversation as well, as we can see after Joe Burrow's injury, how he was trying to will his team back into playoff contention, as there were multiple games where he would pass for over 200 yards and have multiple passing touchdowns. Now you may be wondering, why do I have him ahead of Justin Herbert, who also has team struggles around him but still performs well? The reason for that is because Joe Burrow has had less to work with than Justin Herbert and has done more with less. This includes not only winning a playoff game, which Justin Herbert has not done, but making it to the Super Bowl, where that season the Bengals O-line was also in shambles. Now, he doesn't have the mobility that other QBs have and has missed the playoffs for the last 3 years, which hurts him in the ranking order. But because of everything as a QB that he does individually, I cannot not put him in the top 5 of QBs in the NFL. The two-time NFL MVP, Lamar Jackson, places at number 4 overall, and while I do understand the many criticisms of Lamar Jackson, what he has done cannot be ignored. As I already mentioned, he is a two-time MVP and could have potentially been a three-time MVP, as many people have argued that he should have won the MVP award in 2024. But besides that point, he has been one of the best regular season QBs of all time. It has broken many all-time records. This includes most rushing yards by a QB in NFL history and the highest passer rating by a QB in NFL history. Not to mention that his rushing ability makes him one of the hardest QBs to defend against in the NFL. He has had such a prolific career in the NFL that has been decided by essentially every fan that if he were to retire today, he would make it into the Hall of Fame. Now, there are only two things that really put Lamar Jackson out of the top 3. The first is his inconsistent play when he tries to get back after being hurt, like in 2022 and last year. The second thing is his poor performance in the playoffs. He only has 3 career playoff wins, and during the playoffs, he freezes up, and he's not able to play to the level that we've seen him during the regular season. A good example of this would be the Chiefs game in 2024. The Chiefs offense was being held in check all game long. And every time the Ravens got onto the field, I thought to myself, they just need to score once, and they are right back in this game. And Lamar made mistakes in that game that he wouldn't make in the regular season. Despite that, they were always in the game because of Mike Macdonald's run defense. But Lamar was never able to get one more scoring drive, and they lost that game 10-17. As a Lamar fan, I truly do hope one day that he can get over that hurdle of the playoffs and be able to get the Super Bowl ring that he deserves. Because heading into year 9 of his career, I am having some serious doubts about whether he will be able to do it ever one day. Finally, getting into the top 3, we have Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, as we all know, won the 2025 NFL MVP award and has been able to do something these last few years that most QBs are unable to do. He has been able to become a better QB despite getting up in age. As we all know, Matthew Stafford had his best year last year, throwing for 4,707 passing yards and 46 touchdowns. However, I just want everyone to remember how good he was in Detroit. He is the Lions' all-time leader in passing yards, touchdowns, and has made the most comebacks in a single season with the Lions in 2016. All of his accomplishments, though, were bogged down by all the struggles that the Lions were constantly in, making it impossible to show himself as a Hall of Fame level player that he is to the media. Now that he is on the Rams, and the media is finally starting to look at him as a Hall of Fame player, and as one of the all-time great NFL QBs, now the main argument that I've seen against him in recent years has been the fact that he has had all these weapons around him with the Rams, and that is why he is so good. The thing I would say to anyone who says that is that Matthew Stafford has always played like this. It's just the team around him in Detroit was never winning, so no one really cared at that point in time. Now that he has a good team around him and is winning, people are hearing and seeing more of him. Now he is getting up there in age, while sometimes gets a little banged up and doesn't possess the mobility that other QBs in today's NFL possess. But seeing what he did last year and his ability to play at such a high level despite his age has to leave him as a top 3 QB in the NFL. And I wouldn't be surprised that if he wins another Super Bowl, that there will be more debates about who is the better QB all time, him or Aaron Rodgers. At number 2, and I know some people will be mad at me about this in 2 seconds, we have Patrick Mahomes. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, he has 3 Super Bowl rings. Why is he not at number 1? Well, that was my thought process with this at first as well. I thought to myself, he's won more Super Bowls than every other QB in the NFL currently. However, that is the same reasoning that I've hated about when you bring up a player like Eli Manning, a player who was very inconsistent his entire career, but his Super Bowls just wiped all that away. Now, I'm not saying that Eli Manning and Patrick Mahomes are the same. Absolutely not. Patrick Mahomes is a much better QB than Eli Manning. However, in the last few seasons, Patrick Mahomes has just continued to regress and regress and regress to the point where it was getting hard for me to justify putting him at the top spot anymore. His numbers keep getting lower, his play is getting worse. You can tell that he doesn't possess the same abilities that he once had when the Chiefs' offense was at its peak. Not to mention the fact that the Chiefs have been constantly put in situations where Patrick Mahomes needs to bail himself out at the end of games because of how poor the Chiefs' offense played for the entirety of the game. Now, I'm not going to take away all that Patrick Mahomes has done, especially considering the fact that he has brought his team to 5 Super Bowls, won 3 of them, won MVP twice, and consistently puts the Chiefs in a position to win even when the team around him is not all that great. However, I can't keep putting him at number 1 when every time I turn on the TV on Sunday, I see Mahomes struggling while every other QB is able to live up to the name that they have made for themselves. Finally, at number 1, we have Josh Allen. As QB who is able to do it all, run, pass, catch. He is able to do everything for the Buffalo Bills, and even when the Bills roster is not at its finest, he's still able to perform at an MVP level. He's broken the all-time QB rushing touchdown record and is tied with Tom Brady and Drew Brees for the most games with 3 touchdown passes and at least 1 rushing touchdown. He's always in the MVP conversation every single season and makes his team a Super Bowl contender when, let's just be honest, they are not really much of a contender without him at the helm. Now, I know that people will bring up the playoff losses that have occurred, but when you look at his playoff losses, almost all of them have been from the team around him. We all remember when the defense allowed Patrick Mahomes to get into field goal range with 13 seconds left to go in the game. The missed kick against the Chiefs, the controversial call over whether Josh Allen made it over the line, which I believed he made the first down, and even last year the controversial catch interception against the Denver Broncos. Now I know some people will argue that game with the Denver Broncos because Josh Allen had 4 turnovers in that game. But I also feel that this is forgotten a lot with that game. Allen was still able to have 3 passing touchdowns and get the Bills to 30 points in that game, an amount that should have been enough to win that game. Now, I'm not saying he is blameless for the loss, but when you look at the fact that he was injured during that game and nearly won the game for the Bills, despite having multiple turnovers, should go to show you how good of a QB he is. Allen has been one of the best postseason QBs of all time in NFL history, but it seems like bad luck always strikes him whenever he needs it the most. Similar to Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen will be a Hall of Famer by the time his career is over. The difference is that I feel that Josh Allen will eventually get a Super Bowl ring one day. It may not be with the Buffalo Bills, but with the way that that even in his worst playoff game performed, it should still put him and still puts the team in a position to win. Should say that he has had much better playoff success than Lamar. I truly do believe that he will win a Super Bowl one day, because he is one of the most talented QBs in the entire NFL. And with how consistent he is. I don't believe that he would be the reason he never makes it to the Super Bowl. Well, that is going to end our NFL QB rankings. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please send it to others. It would really help out the channel. If you have anything that you would change about the order, please say so in the comments section below. And after this, we will be discussing some more college football. But until then, be safe, be happy, and live your best life.